Well, this is new, huh? Hi, if you're new here, my name's Camden. Normally, I'm giving you guys travel tips, but I recognize that I don't do a whole lot of just giving you unfiltered access to like the thoughts going through my head of what it's actually like being in these other countries. So for context, if you're new, for the last about 2.5 years, my wife and I, we've been moving to a new country every single month. So we go somewhere, we stay for a month, we pick up and we go to the next place. So full-time nomads. And the objective, I guess, of this video is just to give you that unfiltered, access. We're in Lisbon today. We're up on the rooftop of the place we're staying, and it's beautiful. So I want to share just kind of our experience living in Portugal over the last month. I'm not going to edit any of this, so everything that you're going to see is from this take. I think at the end, if I'm able to pull this off, at the end I'll put maybe like a minute or two of just kind of an edited sequence with not me talking, but just showing you the best shots that I feel like represented my time here in Portugal. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, so we've been based in Lisbon. We treated Lisbon as the home base, and we did a bunch of traveling out. We made it down to the Algarve, stayed in a little town called Fuceta, which is a little fishing village, really tiny area in the Algarve. We did the traditional day trips up to Sintra and Cascais, and did some time up in Porto, and really enjoyed that. We feel like we've seen quite a bit in Portugal in the short period of time. And this is all happening in January, so colder months here compared to what you would traditionally get in Portugal. And we've had a great time, but it's an interesting place, an interesting city. I think a lot of this is going to be, the context will be Lisbon. Lisbon is a tough one. It's obviously beautiful. Like the scenery is absolutely stunning. I think you could make an argument that this is the most beautiful city in all of Europe. Like, it's got charm, it's got that old world feel, it's so colorful, it's very vibrant, and that exists. At the same time, there are a lot of things that aren't great. And I think the time that we came here, this is the first time in Portugal, and it feels like I caught Portugal, maybe Lisbon in particular, in a transitionary period. So for context there, if you've never heard of the Golden Visa program, the government quite some time ago kind of opened up this program that allowed people who were not from Portugal, not from the EU, to basically move in and get citizenship, get residency, and they offered a bunch of different pathways to it. And that's when Portugal really seemed to pick up in terms of tourism. They started getting a lot of people, other digital nomads, people from the UK, the US, retirees, moving here because prices were really low, weather is beautiful, wonderful culture, wonderful food. It's the European Union. It's typically not easy to get an EU passport, and the government offered that, provided a pretty seamless an easy pathway to that for folks who could afford it, and that has definitely changed some things. And I think the transitionary period that I'm catching right now is the end of the wave of them offering that golden visa is kind of now. I believe that program is being rescinded, and for years now people have been getting citizenship, and a place like Lisbon has been overwhelmed with people who are not originally from Portugal coming in, mostly Westerners with a lot of cash, and it's impacted the city in a lot of ways. I talked to people about what the city was like before, and it's a very different thing. I think you can feel that. So I don't know. Again, unfiltered, gonna be a jumbled mess, but I think of Lisbon in particular as a city of extremes. You have this extreme beauty, you have this extreme charm, an extreme culture, which I'll touch on in a minute. At the same time, it feels like there's an extreme pain, and outside of the pain, it's extreme in other ways. It's probably the dirtiest city that I've seen in Europe, and I've seen quite a few. This is not a clean city. I think it's part of the charm. If you're wondering kind of what I mean by that, things just in general aren't clean. There's dog poop everywhere. Like everywhere you go, there's dog poop on the ground. It's not uncommon to basically anywhere you're walking, like it smells like pee or poop, and you're never quite sure, like, is this dog, is this some people? There, to a certain degree, is a level of poverty and pain that you don't necessarily always see in the big European cities. Tend to be more of a social safety net in a lot of the European countries and cities, and Portugal definitely has that. But I think the influx of people with money again have fundamentally like changed the city. So you've just got these extremes. The hills are extremes. The weather is extreme in that it is beautiful. You never really deal with much bad weather. I mean, it's chilly this month, but nothing like what most of Europe and most of the world has to deal with. And yeah, it's tough coming to a city for a month and trying to get like an accurate representation of, okay, is what I experienced over the last month representative of the country? Is this what it actually is? Is this what the people are like? Or was this a moment in time? And I think I always come back to, there are some overarching themes. I'm like, okay, yeah, I've got a general idea of what this place is like, but more than ever, Lisbon feels like a moment in time. And so going back to like that golden visa and like this influx and transitionary period, it seems like they are at the end of this period that has caused a lot of pain. When a bunch of people with more money came into these cities, things changed, right? Businesses were able to drastically raise prices because there was now a group of people that could afford them. Local salaries didn't really go up from my understanding, or certainly not in the way that they would need to be able to to live and maintain the lifestyle that the locals were living before. It seems like a lot of people have lost access to their homes and kind of been pushed out. So Lisbon itself, it feels like that melting pot city, and I think a lot of that is because it feels like you have a lot of people from other spots in Europe that said, I don't need I can leave behind the place that I'm from. My dollar is going to be stronger here. I make good salary. I'm going to live a great life in Lisbon. And I understand people wanting to take advantage of that. But I also understand like the pain of the locals. Like the tourism here is crazy in ways that when you talk to people, it wasn't like this 10, 15, 20 years ago. Everything is more expensive, and the transitionary period seems to be, okay, now it seems like they're kind of pulling back on this golden visa program. The locals are already, have been feeling the pain, and maybe we're getting to a point where that's like hitting a stopping point. Like maybe it's not going to get worse. At the same time, for the people who have been coming here for the cheaper cost of living and excellent lifestyle, they're starting to recognize, hey, this isn't the ultra cheap destination anymore. Things have gotten more expensive, and I've seen this play out in other places. The one that comes to mind is Bali. Like, I don't know, I know this isn't a Bali video, but when we spent a month in Bali, it was before they opened up their digital nomad visa program, and in 1 year, in exactly a calendar year, like the price of the place that we were staying in Bali more than tripled, which I recognize the local salaries were not. So it seems like we're maybe catching Lisbon in a moment of time where the big wave of pain is maybe coming to an end, but also it maybe seems like people don't really know where it's going from here. There are clearly problems. There's clearly pain in the community, and a lot of it seems to be felt, and I could be off on this. So if you're a local, I'd love to get your perspective on this. I felt it most with the older generation. Walking through this neighborhood that I'm staying in, the reason it looks so old and historic, this is the part of town that survived the big earthquake back in the 1700s. And this neighborhood in particular doesn't seem like the neighborhood where a lot of the folks with the new money were coming into. But everything here seems to be centered around tourism. I mean, you have elderly people that you would hope wouldn't have to work anymore, and they're selling here. The local kind of liquor is like a what you call like ginja, however you pronounce it. And you walk the streets down here, and there are local people that are living in conditions that I don't want to say they're unlivable, because it's far from that, but not well off. And during the days, they open kind of the front door, sit on an alleyway, and they're hoping tourists come by where they can sell them, a €1 little shot of this liquor. And the elderly population, older generations that I've interacted with here, seem to be feeling that pain in a way that the young generation maybe isn't reflecting. I'm sure there is pain felt by the younger generations as well. But again, kind of going back to those extremes, the young people seem very vibrant, very full of life here. You walk just about anywhere in the city and you will see young people smiling and in groups and, packs of friends. They all, they're going out to eat. They're drinking on the streets. They're having a good time. They're watching the street artists. They're just living in a really positive, fun way. It's such a beautiful culture. It's a really, really unique place. And at the same time, while that's happening, you can kind of see some of the older generation that maybe understands more of like what's happened, and what it will mean for Portugal as a whole. And there seems to be more pain, at least displayed like on that end, which is so weird getting to catch that glimpse. And again, maybe it's completely off, only here for a month, but it's hard as a tourist, because I recognize I am one, to be in a place like this in this type of time. And of course there are things that that you can do to help, trying to buy from locals who have lived here, and being respectful. I think there's a lot, unfortunately, of tourists who come and just abuse the privilege of lower costs of things, and party late and trash the streets, and walk through the neighborhoods and are really loud and obnoxious. Speaking of loud, there's some bells going. We'll wait for those to stop. Yep, there's that old world charm right there. Beautiful, right? But yeah, I really enjoyed my time here in Lisbon. The first week I didn't, and that was because I got caught in most of the tourist traps. And in the tourist traps in particular, it feels like there's like so much pain felt, because it seems like almost the expectation is that, like, if tourists have money, and that's now what locals are forced to do to kind of survive, which I get. Like, that's a sad reality, and something to come to grips with. So I don't know, I didn't enjoy it that first week as much. It felt very touristy. You've got cruise ships constantly coming in, like that. Where am I pointing? That there's a cruise ship port right there that is constantly just like unloading people. And there's a lot of tourist traps. I managed, as I normally do, when you spend a month in a place, you end up finding the locals if you choose to seek them out. And I found those local places, and those places were much more full of life and just different. But it's so interesting to again talk to the people and talk to other tourists who have had completely different experiences in a city like this. Now I look at Lisbon, and I think I'll remember this as there's a fondness to this. I think it's special to get those like moments in time. I've met a lot of really, really good people, seen a lot of wonderful things and some not wonderful things, but those things that make you appreciate the lifestyle that I'm fortunate enough to get to live right now. It was really special. So Lisbon's a tough one. Talk about some of the other things in Portugal. So like I said, we went down to the Algarve, and that was very different, which I also recognize was the time of year, different, type of tourism season, right? We're at the low end of tourism, which is crazy when I think about all the things that I just mentioned about Lisbon being overwhelmed with tourists. I can't imagine this place in the summer. But the Algarve was beautiful. I mean, stunning scenery, very peaceful. We were in that, little local fishing, village in Fuseta. there were definitely your fair share of snowbirds who were down there, as well. I didn't get enough time down there, and that's my fault, to really get a feel for what the people down there are experiencing. But I really enjoyed my time down there, and that's somewhere where the next time we come to Portugal, we'll likely spend a good chunk of time. Porto was spectacular. If you've watched my tips video on everything I wish I knew before, spending time in Lisbon and Porto, you'll know that next time I come, I plan to be based up in Porto. We felt the culture was different, and of course culture is different in different regions of a country, but you could really feel the difference. You had the same sort of like beauty. You could make the argument very easily that Porto was even more beautiful somehow than Lisbon. Food was exceptional. No offense to the Lisbon folks in terms of food. Food scene's good, but man, the northern cuisine was really, really special. And perhaps that's because it was easier to find because there's less tourism up there. Not saying they don't have tourism. They've got plenty. But it seems like Lisbon maybe has been the most impacted by kind of everything that we've discussed. But Porto really felt like a special place. Still had the same grit, still had the same charm in those ways. But yeah, it's a place I'd love to spend a lot more time. And to be honest, I have no idea where I'm going with this. I got, again, just the unfiltered, thoughts. But I really think that this is a beautiful country from a landscape perspective, from a just how they build things. Their way of life is very peaceful. There's a slower pace of life that you can expect in many European countries. But I do think there is that pain, and I'm very interested to see what happens next. Again, what happens when the people who maybe were coming here because it was cheaper realize, hey, there's going to be a new destination that pops up that they're all going to flock to. What's that leave the locals with? How do the young people feel? I don't know. I really don't. I'm not sure. That's why, like I said, I'm grateful for having had the opportunity to spend the time in Portugal. Certainly a place that will be back. I want to talk about some of the other extremes in a positive way. Crazy to me that somewhere that you look at Portugal and you wouldn't say from an infrastructure perspective, they're not lacking by any sense. But I also wouldn't say like, oh yeah, this is just incredible infrastructure. No, I mean, there's parts of the country that are definitely geographically isolated. It's tough to get to, old world infrastructure. But the Wi-Fi here, incredible. The internet speeds, I have never been to a country with faster internet speeds. Like, doesn't matter where it is, like whether it's a hotel, an Airbnb, a restaurant, a little cafe, everywhere seemed to have like ridiculously fast Wi-Fi speeds, which I appreciated. I haven't done the research. I don't know what you can attribute that to, but spectacular piece of engineering there, especially when you factor in like all these buildings everywhere in the shot. Like, these are all your old world cement buildings that normally it's just a pain in the butt getting good like internet through. So spectacular there. And again, in terms of food, I thought some of the best food I've ever had was up in Porto. I felt here in Lisbon, some of the worst tourist traps were here. Some of the worst food I've had. And not saying, again, that the Lisbon food is bad, but the tourist traps seem to be as bad as anywhere. So, yeah, I don't know. That's, I guess, what I'll leave you with. If you're a local, if you've spent time in Portugal, any region, doesn't have to be Lisbon, I'd love to know when you spent time here, what it was like. If you think anything that I'm saying holds any sort of merit, because I recognize it might not. I'm just some dude on the internet who spent a month in a place, just giving you those thoughts. But I'd love to have some discourse on that. And I will ask that I know that these are sensitive topics, so if you are going to chime in, just be respectful. Like, obviously, you shouldn't have to say that, but it's the internet. Unfortunately, we do. Also want to note, I'm going to try to do this more. So if this is a format that you like, if you enjoy this type of look, let me know. I can definitely do more of it. And I think I've a journal, of course. I'm going to film some of the things on the places that I've spent recently, and do these. So they're there and they'll be there and available if you guys want them. So just let me know if they're useful. But yeah, thanks for coming on this little fun journey. I'm gonna go watch the sunset now. But to the people of Portugal, thank you. It's been wonderful, and I really hope I hope the suffering that I've witnessed is coming to an end. If there's any way that us tourists can help, please let us know, because I think there's a lot of people that would be open to good feedback there. So as promised, I'm going to try to put together a little 1 to 2 minute thing on you not having to listen to me. It's just going to be maybe some nice little music and shots of my time here in Portugal. So I'll roll the tape.